From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now! U.S. forces have launched a pair of airstrikes on southern Somalia. Many people are believed to have died. The Pentagon says the target are members of al-Qaeda. We'll get the latest. Then we look at the charity foundation of Bill and Melinda Gates.
Things that also touch on the same things of dealing with poverty or dealing with opportunity for everyone. And so it's a big challenge for us to make sure that this money gets used in the right way.
It's the world's largest private philanthropic organization, causing harm with the same money it uses to do good. We'll speak with the author of a new expose on the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. We're broadcasting over 500 stations around the country on Pacifica and NPR and Low Power FM and college and community radio stations, as well as on public access TV and PBS TV stations and both TV satellite networks, Dish Network Channel 9415, Free Speech TV, 9410 Link TV, and on Direct TV Channel 375. And we're video and audio podcasting at democracynow.org. Is the world's largest private philanthropy causing harm with the same money it uses to do good? That's the question hanging over the charity of Microsoft founder Bill Gates and his wife Melinda today. The Los Angeles revealed the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has made millions of dollars each year from companies blamed for many of the same social and health problems the foundation seeks to address. The Gates Foundation has an endowment of more than $31 billion. The investment mogul Warren Buffett has pledged an additional $30 billion, delivered in incremental sums. Since its inception 6 years ago, the foundation has committed more than $11 billion to programs around the world. This includes major grants for vaccine and immunization programs, HIV and AIDS research, and public education here in the United States. But the LA Times investigation reveals the Gates Foundation's humanitarian concerns are not reflected in how it invests its money. In the Niger Delta, where the foundation funds programs to fight polio and measles, the foundation's also invested more than $400 million in companies like Royal Dutch Shell, ExxonMobil, and Chevron. These oil firms have been pollution many blame for respiratory problems and other afflictions among the local population. The Gates Foundation has investments in 69 of the worst polluting companies in the U.S. and Canada, including Dow Chemical. It holds stakes in drug companies whose drugs cost far beyond what most AIDS patients around the world can afford. Other companies in the foundation's portfolio have been accused of transgressions, including forcing thousands of people to lose their homes, supporting child labor, defrauding and neglecting patients in need of medical care. Overall, the LA Times says nearly $9 billion in Gates Foundation money is tied up in companies whose practices run counter to the foundation's charitable goals and social mission. And that number may be understated. The Gates Foundation has not provided details on more than $4 billion in investments it says are loans. The Gates Foundation refused to talk to the LA Times about specific investments and whether it planned to change its practices. We also contacted the Gates Foundation for comment, but we didn't get a response. Charles Pillar, the lead reporter on the Los Angeles Times investigative team that broke this story, joins us now from Los Angeles. We welcome you to Democracy Now!
Thanks very much.
It's good to have you with us. Why don't you start out where you began your two-part series, and that is in Nigeria with a 14-month-old boy named Justice. Tell us about him.
Yes, well, the region of the Niger Delta, of course, is a very important economic zone for Nigeria. It's where the vast majority of their oil and gas is generated. And as a result, American companies and other European companies as well have been given pretty much a free rein in developing oil in what is, unfortunately, a very unstable and often corrupt environment. The angle that we looked at specifically, of course, is that we wanted to see whether the charitable goals, the very noble goals of the Gates Foundation, namely in Nigeria, trying to eliminate polio and measles, were in any way undermined or affected by some of their investments in the oil companies that are so important as an economic force in that region. And Justice Etta, the baby that was featured in our story, lives in a village, more like a shanty town, called Ibocha, which is, the name Ibocha means, in the local language, City of Lights. And the lights are gas flares that are blazing 300 feet into the air day and night from an oil plant operated by the Italian oil giant Eni. And these flares spew into the atmosphere not just soot, but toxic chemicals that cause a tremendous range of health problems among the local people. The fumes and the soot are so pervasive that farmers go several kilometers away from the oil plant in order to plant their crops, because otherwise they're covered with pollution and therefore they can't sell them in the marketplace. So we took a look at what kinds of problems are caused by these companies that the Gates Foundation has hundreds of millions of investments in, and tried to ask a pretty basic question. Is it fair to look at the endowment investments of the Gates Foundation and ask whether the results of those investments are offsetting in a significant way the very noble and important charitable goals that they're accomplishing with their donations? And I'm afraid to say that in Bocha, in the Niger Delta, and throughout the world, we found compelling evidence that that indeed was the case.
You interview a doctor where justice lives, named Dr. Elekwachi Oke, who talks about the hundreds of flares at these plants. Tell us more about him and his patients.
Well, my colleague Edmund Sanders interviewed Dr. Oke, and he's someone who is on the ground there and sees the results of the pollution in the health of the people there. Not only problems like asthma or undifferentiated respiratory problems, but also I think one of the key things that to us seemed quite important is that the specific goal of the Gates Foundation in Nigeria is to eliminate polio and measles, and polio in particular, as some viewers may know, the epicenter of the remaining polio outbreak in the world is in Nigeria. So it's a crucial area for reducing the incidence of polio and as part of a worldwide campaign to eradicate the disease. And the problem is that the pollution from these plants, which is so pervasive throughout the countryside, not only causes respiratory problems, but also has the effect, according to health authorities in Nigeria, and I might add that these their views were validated by scientific studies that we were able to find, that these pollutants actually reduce immunity and make the children that are being vaccinated more susceptible to diseases like polio and measles than they otherwise would be. Moreover, many of the parents of children in this area are reluctant to vaccinate children who are suffering from respiratory ailments. They feel that the vaccinations may further weaken their children, rightly or wrongly. And ironically, these are vaccinations that are very important to the children. So what we were able to determine was that there's no pure balance sheet in these matters. It's difficult to know exactly how much the good works of the Gates Foundation in Nigeria are offset by this pollution. But what we do know is that they are contributing on both ends of the problem. And that we found was something that in itself would not be a problem if the foundation were examining its own investments carefully.
We should point out that the kind of flaring you're